We now live in a world where we force our children to bear the weight of adults who don't want to be inconvenienced. Adults who want to look at online pornography and don't want the inconvenience of having to verify their age. U.S. District Judge David Ezra struck down a new Texas law that would have required age verification for pornography websites. So yes, you have to give a government ID to purchase alcohol online or to play the lottery or to buy cigarettes. You even have to present an ID to buy physical forms of obscene material, including pornography. But for some reason, we have powerful lobbies and organized efforts to make sure that online pornography is unencumbered in its reach, even if our children ultimately have to pay the price for this. This really is something that I'm quite passionate about. I'll be vulnerable with you from the jump of this conversation. I was exposed to pornography at a very young age, and it messed me up. It rewired my brain. It created a very, very unhealthy pattern in my life. It distorted my view of sexuality. It distorted my view, I think, of women for a very long time. It has affected me and taken a tremendous amount of effort as someone who does believe in Jesus, who is seeking to make him the Lord of my life, to put accountability measures in place, to have very difficult conversations early in my relationship with my wife. It has raised the stakes in how I raise my own kids and try to protect them from some of this stuff. Scripture is very clear on this. Jesus said in Matthew 5, you've heard it said, do not commit adultery, but I tell you, everyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. 1 Thessalonians says, for this is the will of God, your sanctification, that you abstain from sexual immorality, that each one of you know how to control his own body in holiness and honor. Of course, Paul said to flee from sexual immorality, to get out of there, to run as far and as fast as you can away from it. Do not tempt yourself. Do not play around. So there are many states actually who have been trying to put some kind of regulations in place specifically to protect minors, people under the age of 18, from being able to access online pornography so easily. Now, I know the arguments that it's so prolific on the internet. It's everywhere that even if you had age restriction on the actual hardcore pornography sites, there's still so much on social media sites, and there's just so many things you could Google. Kids could still get access to it. But if the argument is to protect children, if we can't do everything, we should do nothing, then that's an argument we can't take to its logical conclusion. It's like, well, look, if we make people wait till 18 to buy handguns, you know, they can still buy pocket knives, and pocket knives are dangerous. You know, they could still buy lighters. They could still, it's like, okay, fine. So just make it legal. You know, I mean, if we get cocaine off the streets, the kids could still smoke weed. You know, if we get meth off the streets, they could still access fentanyl. It's like, okay, so just make it legal then, right? Is that the actual argument we're making? Or is like the number one job of a well-functioning society to protect the most vulnerable people among us, the most vulnerable being our children, those who don't have the capacity to make these decisions for themselves? Let's look at a couple of articles about what's going on in this case. Federal judge strikes down Texas porn website age verification law. Pornhub and similar online sites scored a victory when a federal judge struck down a Texas law requiring users to verify their age and see health warnings before enjoying the salacious material. The law, signed by Texas Governor Greg Abbott and due to take effect Friday, is too broad and unconstitutional, U.S. District Judge David Ezra said in his 81-page decision. Now, the primary thing that he leveraged was the First Amendment right to freedom of speech. Hardcore pornography equals freedom of speech. That's the argument. Let's read a little bit more. It says Pornhub and other sites fought the Texas statute, as well as similar laws in Louisiana, Utah, Mississippi, and Arkansas. Violating the Texas law carried fines of up to $250,000. Ezra issued the court order blocking enforcement of the law in response to a Porn Trade Association group's August 4th lawsuit. The law could endanger users' privacy as the proposed age verification tool uses a government-issued identification that is traceable, Ezra pointed out. From the beginning, we've argued that the Texas law and those like it are both dangerous and unconstitutional. We're pleased the court agreed with our view that its true purpose is not to protect young people, but to prevent Texans from enjoying First Amendment protected expression. So this is the argument from the pornography industry, that this isn't about protecting kids, because, the pornography industry is very, very interested in protecting your kids.
No!
Like, they are so concerned. Their top priority, it's not making billions of dollars off of the prostitution of men and women, many of those women who have been trafficked and are doing this against their will. Their main goal is to really, really look after you. They probably care more about your kids than you do.
No!
So this is wild. And here in a little while, we're going to look at another lawsuit happening against sites like Pornhub and some of these other big carriers of online pornographic material that should make every human being on earth irate. It proves without a doubt that they do not care about your children. And as a matter of fact, they have a vested interest to make sure that your kid can still, in fact, access online pornography, because if they can get them really young, like I was exposed really young, they can rewire that brain and create a lifelong consumer without serious spiritual and relational intervention. So is this actually speech? That's the argument. This is protected by the First Amendment of free speech and free expression. And part of that argument is a legal argument. This happened with Miller versus California back in the 1970s. And what this created was the highly subjective three-pronged obscenity test. And for something to be seen as obscene, it had to pass three different measures. And the measures are something like, does it elicit the prurient interest, which means does it create basically an out of control, unhealthy lust or arousal for sex. The second is whether or not it meets common decency standards. And that's going to be confined to the commonalities within the state that it resides in. And so it is kind of a state issue, which is how federalism works. And that is so highly subjective. Like, does this meet community standards? Well, in your one community, you're going to have some people who are sexual deviants and some people who are Catholic nuns, right? So how do you actually decide that it's highly subjective? And the third is whether it has any political or artistic or social expression inside of it, or if it's just kind of these degenerate sexual acts. Now, hardcore online pornography, I don't see any way that it passes. Like, in other words, to be obscene, you have to fail one of those three. It fails all of them, right? But it's so subjective that people are able to say that this unbelievable degenerate act that has no moral value, no political value, no social value. It's not a commentary on anything. It's just watching people have sex. But they're able to wiggle their way into it not being obscene. And so they say it's not obscene. To think it's obscene just means you're a prude. You're thinking like a pilgrim, you just don't understand. You're trying to suppress and repress everyone's sexual rights, which there are no, sexual rights. So people are making the argument that this is free speech, that it passes the three-pronged obscenity test. And anyone with an honest view on things would say it doesn't. But what I want to suggest is it doesn't actually matter. And this is something I haven't heard anyone talk about. There's another case that is Ginsburg versus New York. And we're going to actually look at this ruling, Ginsburg versus New York. This is the Wikipedia article, but I did fact check this on several actual legal websites. This was just the best summation of it, where we didn't have to look through just a million different paragraphs to get to the bottom of it. Ginsburg versus New York in 1968 was a United States Supreme Court case that ruled that material that is not obscene may nonetheless be harmful for children, and its marketing may even be regulated. When you go down to the opinion of the court, Justice Brennan delivered the opinion of the court. The court rejected Ginsburg's argument that New York had deprived minors of their liberty. The court found that it was well within the state's power to protect minors, and that just because the material is not classified as obscene to adults, it may still be regulated with minors. That is so crucial, and I don't know why anyone's talking about this. I see no evidence that this has been overturned since 1968. Ginsburg was trying to argue that to not allow minors to buy pornography, he ran a little shop in New York that sold obscene material, that to not allow minors to buy that infringed on their liberty. He was literally trying to make the First Amendment argument. And this Supreme Court ruling said, no, it doesn't. And most importantly, even if it's not classified as obscene, which remember, in Miller versus California, there's a high bar for obscenity. It has to fail all of this three-pronged obscenity test to be obscene. And if it's obscene, it can be regulated. But for minors, according to Ginsburg versus New York, even if it's not obscene, then it still can be regulated. And even the marketing of it can be regulated. Why? Because apparently in 1968, we hadn't fully lost our freaking minds and still understood that it is our job to protect our children, that a highly functioning society protects their children above all else. Jesus is known for his love and his compassion and his grace. But I want to remind you, when it came to kids, he said, whoever causes one of these little ones who believes in me to fall away, to stumble, it would be better for him if a heavy millstone were hung around his neck and he were thrown into the sea.
Wow.
Those are harsh words from Jesus, who is love himself. It's like, if we're not going to protect the kids, what are we doing? And here's really where we live. We now live in a world where we force our children to bear the weight of adults who don't want to be inconvenienced. Adults who want to look at online pornography and don't want the inconvenience of having to verify their age. And the whole argument of, well, then the government could trace me. And look, the government can trace you. Okay. Your phone is watching everything you're doing. Every site well, I have a VPN. Okay, fine. Maybe. But if you think the NSA, if they want to, can't find what you're doing, you are living in a delusion. And the vast majority of people do not hesitate to buy things online and see things online and give their information away and plug their social security number in to some random website to check their credit score. We don't think about it at all. We think about it when it comes to pornography because we are ashamed of what we're doing. That's the one thing we really don't want to get out. We all remember when the Ashley Madison website that helped people cheat on their spouses, when that got hacked and all those names came out and a bunch of men killed themselves because all of a sudden their wife saw all that they were doing and they were ashamed of it. And pornography is a shameful thing. I know this. I lived in that shame spiral. I was one of the kids who wasn't protected from this. And yeah, I was young and curious and sought it out. And it hurt my life. And thank God for redemption. And thank God that he is good and he can use all things for good. And now I have a platform to help other people. And now I'm less naive in trying to help my sons and all of my kids navigate this. But man, what are we doing if we're not protecting our kids? I want to look at one more article. And this just proves, this lobbying group that represents people like Pornhub. They're saying this isn't about protecting the kids. I mean, we love the kids, we love the kids. This is about First Amendment rights. They do not care about your kids. There were leaked emails from MindGeek, which is the parent company that oversees a lot of these pornography websites. And what we found in there, everyone should have like their pitchforks ready. Like these people should be run out of town. These people should spend forever in prison. This is some of the most evil things I've ever seen. Okay. It's honestly hard for me to even read some of this. Child sexual abuse videos that were published on Pornhub needed to be reported numerous times before content moderators would review, documents show. Emails and direct messages dredged up in the discovery phase of a California lawsuit against MindGeek, the parent company of the pornography streaming site, showed a video needed to be flagged more than 15 times before steps were taken. The lawsuit argues that for more than a decade, MindGeek has knowingly received and distributed child sexual abuse material and benefited financially from child sex trafficking on its network of wildly popular pornography websites. The partially redacted 2020 emails show conversations between MindGeek executives and senior personnel on how to respond to a MasterCard inquiry flagging suspected child pornography on the site. Here's some of the back and forth. This is a quote from an email. "Let's not poke MasterCard," the redacted MindGeek CEO, who at the time was founder Ferris Antune, said in a May 27 email chain. "This is very frustrating because imagine they're planning to shut us down." The CEO asked Can we say it slipped through? The question is precise. What did you do to verify age? They are aware that we don't do that to user-generated content. He's saying we do not check age. We do not verify age. It could be an 18-year-old. It could be an 11-year-old. We don't verify age from the pornographic material that goes on our website. And it has to get flagged 15 times before anyone looks at it. And we find out later that in this whole huge company making billions of dollars, there's one person who is actually looking into flagged material, and there are over 700,000 videos in the backlog waiting to be reviewed. So let's say 1% of those 700,000 are actual child abuse sexual material. That's 7,000 videos of children. 7,000. And it's not 1%. It's probably not 10%. It's probably closer to 100 than it is 50. Because the world is sick and the world is perverse and the world is coming after children. I did a video a couple of months ago about the pedophilic network on Instagram and how the Instagram algorithm was knowingly or unknowingly actually promoting this. This is what's happening. And we live in a world where we force our children to bear the weight of adults who don't want to be inconvenienced. We live in a world where if our marriage gets inconvenienced, we divorce. And we talk about how happy we are now, and I'm not with that loser anymore. I'm not with that girl anymore. She was such a drag. And yeah, our kids have to split time between homes, and they're never comfortable, and they think it's their fault, and they're not sure how loved they are, and they're desperate for attention, and they are now statistically set up to struggle in life, and they will need therapy later. But look, the adults can't be inconvenienced, so we'll let the kids bear the weight of this. The adults don't want to have to enter in a little bit of information to get on pornographic websites that are filled with child sexual material who don't care about kids. They don't want to be inconvenienced, so the kids can bear the weight of that and just have unlimited access to all of the deviant material in the world to rewire their young brains. The average age of exposure to pornography is under 10 years old now. And this is the world that we're living in and the world that we're making for ourselves. And it is beyond sad. And we should be saying something about this. And we should be protecting our own children from it to the best of our ability, to get the information we need, to get the knowledge we need, to get the filters we need, to be slow in introducing technology to our kids, to not be naive, because apparently the world has made their decision. They are going to choose the proliferation of adult content, even if it damages our children, as long as they continue making the bottom line as expansive as they can. I hope you enjoyed this clip from the Clayton Tyner podcast. If you want to watch the full podcast, you can check that out somewhere right around here. And if you want to subscribe, you can do that right over here somewhere. Also, you can follow me at Clayton Tyner. That's Tyner on Twitter and Instagram. I would love for you to subscribe to the channel so you can keep up with everything that we're doing.